The time by Carrie Chris is 6 p.m. Time for CBX Business News. The business news headlines is brought to you by QMax Wealth Management, making more possible.
Food security on the agenda. Energy pressures deepen and Africa integration promises big gains. Good evening and welcome to CBX Business News for Friday, February 6, 2026. I'm Rachelle Moncrief. Thanks for joining us. Coming up, Jamaica commissions a new cold storage facility aimed at stabilizing food prices and supporting export-ready agriculture. Also ahead, Cuba prepares for fresh fuel curbs as U.S. pressure intensifies, compounding an energy and economic crisis. And later, IMF says a deeper North Africa integration could lift GDP by 7% and exports by 16%. Stay with us as we unpack these stories and more right after the break.
Wealth is not simply counted in dollars or cents, but in the time we spend with love, in love, giving love. Wealth is not simply a means to an end. It is the means to live out loud. Wealth is more than money. It's about family, the memories you create, the legacy you leave behind, and your ability to enjoy life in the moment. It's also about seeing the QMax possibilities and seizing investment opportunities to achieve the future you want and deserve. Which is why QMax Wealth will focus on your investments so you can experience more. Because true wealth is truly more. To start investing today, call 876-926-7767.
We get the big contract. 50,000 units a month for 3 years. Great. Won't need help.
If you are a business owner that requires capital for the expansion of your business, talk to a registered broker today to find out more about listing your company on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, an efficient alternative to other financing options.
Thank God for the Jamaica Stock Exchange junior market.
The Jamaica Stock Exchange, providing a fair, efficient, and transparent stock market.
The local news is brought to you by Derriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances, tease the senses, and Pulse Investments.
Welcome back to CBX Business News. We begin with government action targeting a long-standing weakness in Jamaica's food sector. Jamaica is moving to stabilize food prices and strengthen agricultural exports with the launch of a new agro-processing and cold storage facility in South St. Elizabeth. The 24,000 square foot complex gives farmers a critical buffer against post-harvest losses that have long driven sharp swings between gluts and shortages. Agriculture Minister Floyd Green says the facility directly targets post-harvest losses that have long destabilized farm incomes and consumer prices.
What this will do is not just helping our farmers, but it will help our consumers. Because when it is short, what happens to the price? The price goes up. And all of you beat up on the Minister of Agriculture. And then when it is in wonderful supply and the price gone down, all I want to celebrate and the farmers beat up on the Minister of Agriculture. What we're doing with storage is to ensure that we have a consistent supply so that we can moderate the price and have a consistent price right through the year.
That was Jamaica's Agriculture Minister Floyd Green. A decade-long fiscal turnaround tested by a Category 5 hurricane is being pitched as the country's biggest investment advantage. Speaking at the recently staged CAF-hosted investment forum, Industry and Investment Minister Senator Orbin Hill says Jamaica's strongest investment advantage is not tax incentives, but institutional stability and policy discipline.
Not only do you bring in money and you get it in easily, but importantly, if you want to take your dividends and investment out, there are no restrictions. That's unusually strong in our region. And we're very proud of it, and it works well. And the currency has remained stable over that period of time, whether it was COVID-19 or Hurricane Beryl or Hurricane Melissa, we manage it well. So you have an economy that is used to good governance and is used to good turning out results.
That was Jamaica's Industry and Investment Minister, Senator Orbin Hill. A timely restructuring of Jamaica's Special Economic Zone (SEZ) regime is replacing rigid geographic zones with a flexible investor-driven model. Jamaica's Special Economic Zone Authority CEO Kelly Dawn Hamilton says investors are no longer forced into government-designated areas, but can establish zones wherever their business operations require.
Currently, we have 104 companies operating as special economic zones in Jamaica. Our regime is a little different in that the private sector is the one that determines where a zone can be located. So we don't have any one space from which you must operate. If your business requires you to be by the coastline, that is where you will be. If it requires you to be in the center of commerce, that is where your zone can be established. So we really, when we say adaptable, we really are adapting to the needs of the private sector and to what it is that drives business decisions.
That was CEO of Jamaica's Special Economic Zone Authority, Kelly Dawn Hamilton. Coffee, rum, cocoa, and specialty foods are no longer being marketed as just souvenirs. They are being positioned as Jamaica's next export growth engine. JAMPRO President Shalette Cox says the strategy is to let tourism validate products locally before scaling them into global markets.
What we have sought to do as a country is to build on the basic resources of our agriculture and industry to create niche value-added products that are not only ready to go out into the world through exports, but they're exposed to our tourists. So half of the time, you're talking about products that have already established a market at home before they're going out.
That was JAMPRO President Shalette Cox. In other news, Fitch Ratings has affirmed Jamaica's sovereign credit rating at BB- with a stable outlook, maintaining its assessment despite the lingering economic effects of Hurricane Melissa. In its latest 2026 rating action, Fitch confirmed that Jamaica's credit profile remains consistent with the current rating level, reflecting the country's ongoing exposure to hurricane-related disruptions alongside existing fiscal and economic pressures. The agency acknowledged that the hurricane continues to weigh on economic activity, particularly in tourism, while noting that the government's response has been supported by access to external financing and available buffers. Fitch expects public debt to rise in the near term as reconstruction continues, but emphasized that the rating remains supported by stable financing conditions and policy continuity, underpinning the stable outlook. We move to the latest updates from the JSE equities. In Friday's trading session, the JSE market activity resulted in the trading of 120 stocks, of which 43 advanced, 59 declined, and 18 traded firm. Leading today's winners are ISP Finance Services, MPC Caribbean Clean Energy USD, Sterling Investments USD, and Productive Business Solutions 10.50% perpetual cumulative redeemable preference share. While leading the losers are Medical Disposables and Supplies, AMG Packaging and Paper Company, Mayberry Jamaican Equities, and Palace Amusement Company. The main index advanced by 4,105.61 points to close at 342,361.72 points. The junior market index declined by 48.30 points to close at 3,282.73 points.
And it's time for Market Education Feature, brought to you by CariCris, Regional Ratings, Global Standard.
In today's Market Education Feature, we're looking at the term climate finance. Climate finance refers to funding provided at the local, national, or international level to support efforts that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help communities adapt to the impacts of climate change. These funds can come from public sources, private investors, or alternative financing channels. Climate finance is essential for cutting emissions and equally important for helping countries adapt to climate risks, as both require large-scale and sustained investment. Examples include grants from multilateral funds, concessional or market-based loans, sovereign green bonds, and revenues from mechanisms such as carbon trading or carbon taxes.
The Market Education Feature was brought to you by CariCris, Regional Ratings, Global Standards.
And that's it for the local news segment. Please stay with us. The regional news is up next.
The local news is brought to you by Darriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances, tease the senses. And Pulse Investments.
Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances. It started out as a small family-owned business, and now we're a part of a large group of companies. Being listed on the stock exchange allows us a certain prestige. It also speaks to accountability and transparency. We had some fears about getting our information in the public domain, but once we contacted the Jamaica Stock Exchange, who have the knowledge and the experience to guide us, we were comfortable with getting into the process. If you have any doubts about being listed, just give the Jamaica Stock Exchange a call. They'll be very happy to take you through the process and also provide you with information that you may need. Make that call now.
Welcome back. And now for the regional business news. Cuba is preparing to roll out new fuel-saving measures within days as tightening U.S. pressure on oil supplies pushes the island deeper into an energy-driven economic squeeze. President Miguel Diaz-Canel says the shortages are already pushing up food and transportation costs while disrupting electricity generation and essential services. Blackouts have affected several provinces, including parts of Havana. Tensions escalated after Washington announced it would impose tariffs on goods from countries that continue supplying oil to Cuba, a move that has discouraged fuel shipments and deepened the energy crisis. Canel says the government will introduce temporary but restrictive measures prioritizing fuel for hospitals, public transport, and other critical services, while some economic activity may be reduced or postponed. Cuba has signaled openness to dialogue with the United States, but says any talks must respect its sovereignty. Meanwhile, authorities plan to expand solar power generation and increase domestic oil production to ease fuel dependence. The crisis adds to mounting economic challenges facing the island, with implications for tourism, trade, and regional energy markets. President of the Barbados Labour Party, BLP, and Prime Minister Mia Mottley is defending her government's economic record on the campaign trail ahead of next week's general election. Her defense comes as political debates heat up over how best to ease the cost of living pressures in the country. Speaking at a BLP public meeting in St. Michael on Thursday, Mottley pointed to a budget surplus and outlined why her administration is rejecting opposition calls to cut value-added tax, VAT.
From April to November last year, this government has already managed your affairs such that there was a surplus of $148 million. And that is not the whole financial year, because you still have 4 months to go after November. So when I tell you that the package, which also includes the $1,200 cash credit for cost of living for all pensioners, contributory or non-contributory, small or large, all welfare beneficiaries on top of the 30% that they get in, and all people who get the special needs grant, adult or children, that when you add all of that together, it comes to 142 million, and it is within our capacity.
The Prime Minister also pointed to her government's fiscal prudence, arguing that further relief should come through direct cash support rather than VAT cuts proposed by opposition leader Ralph Thorne.
Unlike him, we do not believe in reducing the VAT to 15% because the merchants generally do not bring back down prices once prices go up in the air. So the government will lose the revenue, and you, the consumer, will not get the benefit of the reduced prices. This way, I am not sending it via any intermediary. Lillian, you are a pensioner. You will get your $1,200 on top of your pension.
That was President of the Barbados Labour Party, BLP, and Prime Minister Mia Mottley. In other news, Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Minister Dr. Rudal Munilal says discussions are underway with Indian Oil Corporation as the government explores options to restart refining operations at the Point-a-Pierre refinery. Speaking at a post-cabinet media briefing on Thursday, Munilal said the talks follow high-level meetings in India where the state-owned energy company expressed interest in returning to TNT after previously operating in the country decades ago.
We intend to work with them to ensure that we participate in a process that would lead to the reopening and restarting of the refinery at Point-a-Pierre. We discussed with that delegation the provision of technical expertise and strategic directions. They have a wealth of experience in refinery capacity at various refineries, as I said, across Asia. The delegation indicated that there is a readily available local workforce to support the resumption of refining operations. We were told that Indian Oil was also very much interested in the entire Caribbean region and would be happy to return to Trinidad and Tobago, having done some work here, I believe, in the late 1990s. We expect within a short period of a few weeks, certainly post-Carnival, we expect that we will be in a position to welcome a technical team from Indian Oil to look at the refinery and to give us some direction, some support. They were extremely pleased to return to Trinidad and Tobago since they had been here before, and they were extremely happy to know, which they indicated, the powerful local labor force that we have in refining and oil and gas.
That was Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Minister, Dr. Rudal Munilale. It's now time for news from the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 26 securities, of which 8 advanced, 2 declined, and 16 traded firm. Today's winners are Trinidad and Tobago NGL, Unilever Caribbean, National Flour Mills, and Massey Holdings. While leading the losers are Prestige Holdings and Guardian Holdings. Trading activity resulted in the following movements. The All-TNT Index advanced by 2.94 points to close at 1,394.60. The Composite Index advanced by 1.53 points to close at 961.39. The Cross-Listed and SME Index remained unchanged at 69.63 and 92.68 respectively. And we take a short break, but please do stay with us. The international news segment is up next.
Are so much book you need for high school?
I'll show you how to make sure you have all the money for my books and even some extra. It's called budgeting, Dad. Making a budget is the most important thing you can do to track your money. It keeps a record of how much you make, how much you spend, where you spend it, and most importantly, how much you can save. Write down all your income, write down all your expenses, see where you can cut down and allot more money to more important things, like saving.
Welcome back. In international news, North Africa could unlock a major growth dividend by deepening economic integration with Europe and sub-Saharan Africa, according to new analysis from the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Speaking on Thursday at a high-level conference in Algiers, IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva says stronger trade links could raise North Africa's exports by as much as 16% and lift regional GDP by 7%.
We are publishing a new paper, research we did specifically for this conference, and it tells us that increased North Africa's economic linkages with Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa could boost the level of North Africa's exports by 16% and GDP by 7%. This is an equivalent of $67 billion that could, of course, lift up the well-being of people. There would be also meaningful benefits for both Sub-Saharan Africa and Europe to greater supply chain participation and investment and greater resilience and growth in neighboring regions.
Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva. And as global regions chart different paths to growth, attention now turns to Europe's monetary stance. The Bank of England, BOE, has signaled a clear pause in its easing cycle, holding the bank's interest rate steady at 3.75% after 6 consecutive cuts. BOE Governor Andrew Bailey says the decision was driven by a clear easing in inflationary pressures. He was speaking during the bank's Monetary Policy Report press conference on Thursday.
As inflation has fallen, we've been able to ease our foot off the brake, making monetary policy less restrictive by cutting bank rates 6 times, including at the meeting we held in December. Recent developments provide more confidence that inflation is on track to return to the target soon. But we need to ensure that inflation falls all the way back to the 2% target and stays there. So today we've held bank rate at 3.75%.
That was Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey. Moving now across the Atlantic, where the tone is more cautious. The Bank of Canada is warning markets that cutting interest rates too aggressively could reignite inflation, as part of Canada's economic slowdown is structural, not cyclical. Governor Tiff Macklem says weak growth does not automatically justify more monetary stimulus, cautioning that misreading longer-term structural constraints as a temporary downturn could prove costly.
There's 2 kinds of mistakes you could make. If we thought the weakness was more structural, so more, the capacity is not there, when in fact it is more cyclical, what that means is, we'd make the mistake of not providing enough monetary policy stimulus, and inflation would come in, economy be weaker than it needed to be, and inflation would be presumably below our target. The other risk, which I highlighted, is that the economy's weak. We interpret that as largely cyclical, when in fact more of it is structural, and so we lower rates too much, and inflation goes up.
That was Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem. Turning now to global labor markets. Unemployment in Russia remains near record low levels, highlighting persistent labor shortages across the economy. The jobless rate edged up to 2.2% in December from 2.1% in November, in line with market expectations. Despite the increase, unemployment remains historically low more than 3 years after the deployment of military forces in early 2022. The number of unemployed rose slightly to 2 million, while the overall labor force held steady at 76 million. Employment remained unchanged at 75 million, keeping the employment rate stable at 62%. Officially registered unemployment also stayed broadly flat at around 300,000 people. Looking ahead, authorities warn pressures will intensify, with Russia projected to face a 3.1 million worker shortfall by 2030. And that's it for the international segment of the newscast. The news recap is coming up on the other side of the break.
Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. What you put in is what you get out. What you put in is what you get out. Yeah. Build up your body, boost up your brain. Take on the world now. Say bye-bye pain. Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. Be good to you. Caribbean dreams, instant turmeric tea. Distributed by Amalgamated Distributors Limited.
And now to recap our top stories. In the local news, Jamaica commissions new cold storage facility to stabilize food prices. Regionally, Cuba prepares for fresh fuel curbs as U.S. pressure intensifies. And internationally, IMF says deeper North Africa integration could lift GDP by 7% and exports by 16%. Those were the stories making today's CBX Evening News. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Rachelle Moncrief. Thanks for watching CBX, your region, your business, your source.